The term gentrification is a controversial topic introduced by Ruth Glass in the 1960s. It is defined by the displacement of lower class residents by an influx of higher class residents. With the influx of a higher class demographic, both residents face both social and economic impacts.
Hi, my name is Maya Bax.
I'm Anthony Ramirez.
I'm Isabella Pujol.
And I'm Valeria Morales. As a percentage of gentrified low-income census tracts in the largest 50 U.S. cities has more than doubled since the 1990s. There has been more controversy surrounding the actual effects of gentrification on residents of urban areas, which leads us to the question, to what extent does gentrification affect the residents of urban areas in the past 25 years?
We have examined 3 ways that residents in urban areas are affected by gentrification. The first being the loss of community, the second being the rise of housing costs increasing, and the third being the negative impacts of residential health. When gentrification happens, an influx of residents that are higher educated or college educated enter the neighborhood. This causes a rise in the cost of housing, and this puts an economic strain on original residents. This graph shows the rise in cost of housing from gentrified neighborhoods versus non-gentrified neighborhoods. As you can see in the blue bar, non-gentrified neighborhoods rose $84,000 US from 2000 to 2014, and in the red bar, gentrified neighborhoods rose $125,000 from 2000 to 2015. The disproportionate rise in costs from gentrified versus non-gentrified neighborhoods is due to the influx of a new demographic that Valeria mentioned earlier. This graph shows this translates into original residents from gentrified areas having to move further in order to find an affordable home. This graph shows from higher income areas, residents are moving on average 2.6 miles from their neighborhood. In moderately gentrified areas, residents are moving 2.7 miles from their neighborhood. And in rapidly gentrifying areas, residents are moving 2.8 miles from their neighborhood. We can see that the more gentrification that's happening in an area means that there will be further miles traveled from their area. This means that children are being ripped out of their schools, that parents have to move further and find new jobs, and that they have to adjust to a new community.
As gentrification grows and expands through many cities in our country, many of these communities are being torn apart by its effects. For example, people are having to work overtime in order to be able to keep up with rising housing and food prices, which ultimately destroys communities because people have to take time away from community activities and leisure time. In addition to this, the new residents of gentrified areas disrupt the original communities that were previously established because they usually come from different socioeconomic, different cultural and places of origin. More of these incoming residents are also college educated at higher rates than the original residents' demographics. These differences in socioeconomic and education status cause a divide between the community, and as the new demographic moves in, the community is lost. In this first image, we can see the effects that gentrification has had on the minority population in the Denver urban areas. We can see here how the prices rose from $144,000 to $256,000 from 2000 to 2010. This represents an increase in average house cost of around 40%. This led to the Hispanic and Black population decreasing over 44% and 35% respectively. This ultimately destroys communities since a big part of the people that form these communities are being displaced, and the people who are taking over their place are not necessarily open to being part of that community. In the second image, we can more clearly see the extent to which gentrification has had an impact all over our country. This is because we can see that around all of the major urban areas and all of the major cities in our country are being affected by gentrification. So we can only assume that this is happening, like communities are being destroyed all over America.
Incoming residents causing a shift to the overall community and the cost of living have contributed to a decrease in residential health of the incumbent residents. As Samaya has previously stated, the advantages that higher income families may have in a community compared to vulnerable residents, it is also applicable in medical care. Venus Wilder from the Icahn School of Medicine has shown the disregard for medical needs of the vulnerable residents of a gentrified area, such as in San Francisco. Individuals that have been diagnosed with HIV have reported, quote, little access to the potential benefits of state-encouraged urban regeneration, while its effects on the rent market further constrained financial viability, which can lead to financial struggles and food insecurities as an alternative to their displacement. This longitudinal analysis from Brown University shows the relationship between gentrification and the health of the residents. Specifically in Los Angeles County from 2000 to 2008, where we can see that there was a higher self-rating of poor and fair health when compared to very good and excellent health. It is important to note that those in the poor and fair categories are more likely to live in gentrified areas, while those in the very good and excellent categories are more likely to live in non-gentrified areas. The CDC has also shown studies that show how vulnerable residents in these gentrified areas are more likely to experience shorter life expectancies, higher cancer rates, more birth defects, greater infant mortality, and higher instances of asthma, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease.
Some solutions that we could provide for fixing or at least reducing the negative effects of gentrification is creating affordable housing for all incomes. What we can do by this is actually developing a mixed income community, which offer a variety of housing prices that include both single and multi-family units, providing housing choices for multiple income levels. We could also approve policies to ensure the stability of residents. An example of this is preserving federally subsidized housing programs and considering code enforcements to assist residents with home improvements. We could also reduce dependence on subsidized housing by creating more home ownership programs and also job creation programs and strategies. Here we could also ensure their benefits by reviewing and revising gentrification proposals to make sure that the residents are not being displaced. We could also involve the community in 3 ways, which is allowing the opportunity to provide input to the design and redevelopment of their community and neighborhood. We could also educate the community on future projects and create organized bodies and partnerships to develop programs to mitigate the gentrification. Some limitations are that the Healthy Community Design Initiative provided by the CDC in the slides above, the past slides, it is no longer a funded program, but we could still take these steps to outline for future developments to ensure a better transition for gentrified neighborhoods. Thank you. These are works cited. Thank you. Any questions?
I do have some questions. Take a step back. All right, there you go. Cool. All right. You're up first, as you knew. Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that you guys identified?
Samaya's work was about the rise of housing costs, and I really thought that her research on how these families are being displaced as a result of this gentrification is the biggest issue to me, because it's multiple lives that are being changed, and just because of the change in the environment causing these rising costs that could be prevented by that their displacement could be prevented.
Okay.
Thanks.
Samaya, what's an example of a compelling argument from one of your peers' individual reports that you decided to exclude from your team presentation, and then why so?
We decided to exclude Valeria's perspective, which was that the impacts of gentrification on education. These impacts showed mainly positive. Gentrification showed mainly positive effects on education. However, we decided that still didn't outweigh the negative impacts of all of mine, Isabella's, and Anthony's perspectives.
All right, thank you. Valeria, what's a way in which your team's resolution, or I guess for you guys, solution, makes you think differently about your own individual research?
I wasn't really considering like the housing. I was mainly focused on education, so the fact that people were being displaced, and I wasn't really focusing on that, so it kind of opened my eyes a little bit more. Housing opportunities and what we can do to create more jobs as well.
All right, and save the best for last. Describe an argument from one of your peers' individual reports that makes you think differently about your team's solution.
Well, as Mary previously stated, Valeria's research showed that gentrification actually has some good effects, right? Mainly on education. And I don't know, I from like the get-go, from like the start of it, I always saw it as a bad thing. However, I didn't really consider that there could be some good things that came up as a result of gentrification.